Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of The Beat of the Spring 2017 semester. I'm your host and opinions reporter, Jonathan Van Niel, and I am joined by...
Multimedia editor, Geovanny-Alcibia-Guzman.
And today we actually have an incredibly special episode. We are joined by the illustrious Dr. Jill Stein, former presidential candidate of the Green Party for the 2012 election as well as the 2016 election. How are you doing today, Jill?
I'm doing great. Yeah, we're on a tour of California college campuses, and the campuses are on fire, as they should be.
Quite literally, especially in here. It is quite hot in Riverside City right now. So before we even get into any of the questions, I just want to express on behalf of Viewpoints, this is truly an honor, and we're deeply grateful for having you here and for actually taking the time out of your very busy schedule to come in here and interview us, or be interviewed by us, excuse me. But
it is mutual.
Yeah, it's very true, very true.
And I'll say the honor is mutual too, because I was convinced a long time ago that if we are going to have change here, which is life-saving, we're not going to get out of here alive unless we have transformative change. And there's one place that has always come from, and that is the younger generation. And so no pressure, but
no pressure.
This is the place to be. Yeah. I have to say, this is where the change is coming from, and anything I can do to help support that change and your liberation from the bonds of debt and oppression of various forms, anything I can do to help liberate this younger generation to actually lead us forward, that's what I'm on this planet for right now.
And that's a wonderful message. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
So we're going to get right into it. So you're here at Riverside City College, and you're going to be discussing a myriad of topics, many of which, if not all, RCC students are going to have some sort of hold to that. What is it that you hope to achieve from this visit and your California speaking tour in general?
That change, that transformation, and that liberation. In my view, liberating the younger generation is the gateway issue to everything else, because it's always young people that have led the way on the civil rights movement, on Black Lives Matter, on climate justice, at Standing Rock, against the KXL pipeline. It has always, stopping the war in Vietnam, from my coming of age, it was all about young people standing up and fighting for our lives. And we had the courage of our convictions back in the 60s because we knew that our lives were on the line. Our brothers largely, and particularly brothers of color, were being sent to die in Vietnam. So we were out in the streets like our lives depended on it. I think we've come full circle. We understand that our lives, again, now depend on transformative change. So we are out there fighting to end deportations, to end the outrage of night raids and detentions against immigrants who are largely refugees, having fled from abusive and predatory policies, largely of the United States, in particular in Latin America, and then we criminalize refugees when they're here, or the meltdown of the climate, or student debt. All of these things have put our lives on the line, and that is this moment of opportunity that I'm here to help support.
What do you say you're after the millennial vote? Is that your main focus?
So let me say, I don't know if I'm running for office, so I'm not sure that it's a vote on my behalf, but I'm certainly working to liberate the millennial vote so that millennials can actually stand up and vote on behalf of their own interests, and not for these corporate powers that are trying to intimidate us into voting for the status quo under one disguise or another.
So you're not after the 2020 race?
I don't know. But I think we need to have all races in our target hairs, including Kenneth Mejia's race in Los Angeles, where people can help no matter where they are in this state. Right now, if I'm stomping for Kenneth, and I'm stomping for Sherry Honkala, who is running for state representative in Philadelphia, as Kenneth Mejia is running for Congress in the 34th District in LA. Both of these are winnable special elections. All of us can help by going to their websites and basically pitching in, making a contribution, or volunteering and phone banking from a distance.
Absolutely. All right, so this is going to bring us to our next question. The Riverside Community College District has an increasingly diverse population of students. The Board of Trustees is considering providing more public safety by increasing the amount of on-campus law enforcement. Do you believe that a greater volume of police officers on school grounds will be beneficial to the academic success of students of color?
I think the presence of police tends to be intimidating and create stress and anxiety, given the incredible history and current affairs whereby people of color are at enormous risk walking down the street. And there's case after case of police racist abuse, which is tragic. That does not provide security. I mean, there are many other ways to provide security, through community watch and through prevention by meeting the needs of people who are desperate. That should be what real security is about, not by taking away from critical aspects of our public resources to support things like education and jobs and housing and drug treatment. That's how we truly create security, not by spending as much as half of urban budgets are going into police forces. The same is true nationally. Half of our discretionary dollars are going into the military, and that does not make us secure. We need to ensure that we are supporting truly meeting human needs. That's how we create real security.
Okay, so we're going to the DNC now. So Democrats claim to be the left of the political spectrum. Do you agree with that? Or do you think the similarities between the two main parties far outweigh the differences? And in that spectrum between the left and the right, where do you land?
So in my view, this mythology of left and right it's a myth. And the Democrats have a good public relations line, and they appear to be on our side from what they say, but you actually have to look at what they do. So the problems that have become so severe under Donald Trump really had their roots very much in the Obama administration and both in the Bush and Clinton administrations before them, including the demonization of immigrants, the militarization of our borders, the exporting of our jobs, the meltdown of the climate, the war on the press, the surveillance state, mass incarceration began actually under the Clintons with Bill Clinton's criminal reform bill of the 1990s. That was really the beginning of mass incarceration. It was also the beginning of the militarization of the border. So I think we should not be played off into this very limited two-party corporate system, which is fundamentally serving the needs. That's not to say that they're the same. They are different, but they are not different enough to save our lives, to save our jobs, or to save our planet, or to save us from nuclear holocaust. They are too similar. What I say is that we are a party of the people. The Green Party does not take corporate money. We are of, by, and for the people. We can stand up for what will actually solve those problems.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so what we're going to be going into next is the EPA. So the Environmental Protection Agency is rumored to be facing a 25% cut of its $8.1 billion budget, as well as a 20% reduction of their workforce. Do you believe that the slashing of a department that is designed to protect human health and our environment is beneficial?
It is an outrage. At the same time that they're slashing the EPA, they're increasing the military budget by some, whatever it is, $50-60 billion, which is like more than the EPA budget, right there. What did you say the numbers were on the EPA budget, actually?
It's $8.1 billion.
Yeah, so
it's quite
a few times over.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem in a nutshell. We are we're bankrupting ourselves in order to destroy the environment, essentially, because that's what, the military does. Largest consumer of greenhouse gases, creates incredible toxic waste, poisons our water supplies, and so on. We're bankrupting ourselves in order to do that. And meanwhile, we are likewise destroying the agencies that we depend on for life itself. This is crazy, and this is why we have to stand up. In the same breath, I want to note that under Richard Nixon, who prior to now was one of the most corrupt, authoritarian, tyrannical presidents in our history, what did we accomplish? We brought the troops home from Vietnam. We created the EPA, the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, OSHA, got women's right to choose from a conservative Supreme Court because we were out in the streets like our lives depend on it. That is the name of the game, is standing up and using the power that we already have. Just the number of young people locked into student debt alone is enough to win any three-way election, whether it's presidential, whether it's your city council. We can win these races if we mobilize. They want young people to feel discouraged, depressed, and to tune out. It's important to reject that propaganda of powerlessness, to stand up with the power that we have and to say that we are taking charge, not only out in the streets, but with the Green Party to get behind candidates for election and to start challenging power and taking power. That's how we turn this around.
Absolutely. And I actually have a follow-up question for the EPA. So recently the appointment of Scott Pruitt happened. What is the long-term implications of having someone like Pruitt in charge of that department when he quite literally does not believe in climate change?
Yeah, I mean, it's a joke. It's like having Perry, former Governor Perry, in charge of energy. You know, the guy who went on record that he wanted to dismantle and destroy the Department of Energy. It's like having Betsy DeVos, an advocate for charters and for religious schools and for vouchers and private schools, in charge of public education, where she basically helped dismantle that in Detroit. So this is the wake-up moment. And for people who supported Donald Trump, not because they were supporting him, largely Trump voters were voting against the Democrats and against Hillary Clinton. And meanwhile, the political establishment and the media were hiding the fact that there was another campaign that was about the people, was about supporting these agencies, was about our healthcare, our public schools, and the EPA. So that to me is our job. It's like the saying, don't get angry, get even. We can be really pissed off, but don't let it get you down. Let it be so much more energy to get you supercharged about how powerful we are and how much we need to stand up and double down now to assert the power that we have to change the course of history. We did it during Richard Nixon. We can do it again now.
So speaking of Trump's cabinet, it seems that we are in a corporate-owned government with a Trump administration. Mm-hmm. We have, you just mentioned, Betsy DeVos, who wants to privatize education. Trump's Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao, recently talked about privatizing roads. Our Secretary of State is a former ExxonMobil CEO who is obviously against green energy and everything you stand for. The list goes on and on.
Yes.
So, in your opinion, how long before we start seeing the full effects of the corporatization in America? And and what will be the byproduct of that?
Right. It's going to do a lot of damage, across the board. Dismantling the last vestiges of a safety net in healthcare, with their bill, which is really, some have called it a wealth care bill. It's not a health care bill. It's a wealth care bill. Destroying the environmental justice programs at the EPA, which is part of what they're talking about, which is essentially destroying the little bit of protection that the people who are most in the target hairs right now have. We have an epidemic of asthma and cancer and all sorts of conditions related to air pollution. This is a direct assault on our humanity, on people, on our health, on our survival. It's an absolute tragedy, and it accelerates what's been going on for decades, actually, as we've had a corporatization of our government. And, Congress is now mostly millionaires in the House of Representatives. Oligarchy has taken over. Now the mask has come off, and it's been a big wake-up. So the horrible thing is that, people are going to get hurt here, get hurt badly. And some of the damage is going to be quite irreparable. Lives are going to be destroyed. On the positive side, the silver lining is that we are mobilizing, and we're mobilizing quickly. And the more mobilized we get, the better, and that has to include politics.
Do you think people are aware enough of the selling off of America to big power conglomerates, though?
It's very interesting because to listen to the media, you wouldn't know that, especially to listen to,
Correct.
the corporate so-called progressive media, which is all about, let's just go back to Hillary Clinton and the Democrats, to listen to Rachel Maddow, the only problem is that a Republican got elected, not that the Democrats were so bad that they drove a lot of people into that camp. Had Bernie Sanders not been sabotaged, Bernie Sanders would have won this election, and it would be a very different picture. So there's a lot of blame to go around here to both corporate political parties. And in my contacts out in the street and in community meetings, people are very aware. I mean, the Green Party is booming right now. We just had the biggest statewide meeting in California that we've ever had. About 75% of the people who came were entirely new. So, there's been a huge influx. We're seeing the party revived in states where it's been invisible for decades, Montana, New Hampshire, all over the country. So a lot of people are waking up to the fact that we do not have a future between these two corporate parties. We need to stop allowing them to bounce us from one to the other. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We need to stand up for ourselves with our politics.
And real quick, speaking of the media, it seems like they would benefit most out of Trump's corporate policy, even, progressive, so-called progressive media like MSNBC and such.
As the president of CBS actually said during the election, Donald Trump may not be good for America, but he sure is good for my bottom line.
Oh, yes.
So I hope he and the other corporate media executives are happy. But, America is going down the tubes in a very dangerous way that will endanger them as well. So there was a poll done last spring by the AP NORC groups, and what it showed was that 9 out of 10 Americans have lost confidence in our political and social systems. That includes in our executive, our judiciary, our Congress, and our media and our elections. What does that tell you? We had a garbage election, much thanks to the media. And out of that garbage election, we got garbage results. The solution is not just, we needed to change a couple votes or something. We really need to transform our political system and take it back so that it serves us.
Absolutely. Which, lovely, brings us into our next question.
Mm-hmm.
So the Green Party has developed a 4-part Green New Deal, which is designed to return power to local levels.
Yes.
The New Deal consists of, but is not limited to, the creation of a full employment program, a single-payer Medicare system, federally funded tuition-free education, and affordable housing. How is it that the Green Party plans on accomplishing this radical shift in American politics?
Great. In a way, it's very simple. The American public has had a radical shift, and polls show not only would Bernie Sanders have won, but all of these issues for housing, for jobs, free public higher education, that is part of our so-called Power to the People plan, which is what the Green New Deal is a part of. The umbrella here is the Power to the People plan. And these are majoritarian ideas. The American people actually support them. So how we pass any of them is basically by building a large coalition and not allowing ourselves to be divided into one issue at a time. We need a humane and welcoming immigration policy. We also need jobs. We also need higher education, which is free as a human right. Healthcare is a human right. We need to cancel student debt like we did for the crooks on Wall Street. We bailed them out. We need to bail out their victims. We can only do these things if we do them together for a variety of reasons, because they are joined at the hip. These issues are very connected. We cannot solve one without also solving the others. But most critically, as a practical matter, we need to work together. Otherwise, we are divided and conquered. They would like us to work on one issue at a time. A political party, I discovered after 50 years of resisting any political party and refusing to have anything to do with politics, after 50 years, I realized this is a losing proposition. Politics is essentially a coalition that works on staying together for a broad and explicit agenda for people, planet, and peace over profit is the Green Party's agenda. And in doing that, we can push our way forward, starting particularly at local and winnable races, but all the way on up. I think in many ways we were one debate away from a political revolution. The American people were clamoring for another way forward, and these were the most disliked, untrusted candidates in our history. Had we been able to inform people, I think all bets are off about what would have happened. The people are ready to go. If, say, a Green were to be elected, it's all about using that bully pulpit to engage the power that's there to push through one critical bill after another. We've done it in stopping the privatization of the internet, in stopping the KXL pipeline. When we work together, we can make things happen. If we had people in high office, you can bet we could start working together in a unstoppable way.
And I actually have a follow-up for that. Hypothetical situation: a Green Party president, a third party is president. What about opposition from the two dominant parties? Do we really believe that it's realistic that these individuals are going to support a third-party candidate's policies, or are they more likely to just fall in line with the party line?
They will only support these policies if they are forced to support these policies. That's where the president, as the organizer in chief, comes in. We stopped, for example, the bombing campaign of Syria back in, I think it was 2012, or it might have been 2013. But it was the first effort to bomb Syria related to the chemical weapons. We stopped it. It was like resistance is futile, don't even bother. We stopped it because we mobilized to stop it. We went to our congressmen's and women's offices, and we refused to leave until we won them over. When they are confronted by their voters, and they understand that they're going to be removed from office, not only challenged in the upcoming election, but that there will be a campaign to actually remove them from office, that's when they start moving. It's in our absence. It's in a political vacuum that they take marching orders from the lobbyists. We have to overwhelm the force of lobbyists. And having an organizer in chief, whether it's at the governor level or the presidential level, gives us an opportunity to do that. We stop the privatization of the internet through the same kinds of organizing tactics. That's what we need to be able to do.
So I have a question about jobs. We have been heading on a direction of total automation, with robots replacing the American workforce at a much faster rate than before. And according to many studies, automation has been the real job killer and not necessarily trade deals. So what would you do about that if you were to become president?
So two things. One, first thing I would do is declare a state of emergency. We have a climate emergency as well as an economic emergency, because for most people the economy has not recovered. But we have a very clear climate emergency where Jim Hansen, the foremost climate scientist, 2 years ago was predicting we could see 10 or 20 feet of sea level rise as soon as 2060, which is absolutely devastating. It will wipe out all coastal population centers, essentially. We need to declare a state of emergency. It's like when Pearl Harbor was bombed at the outset of the Second World War. It took 6 months to transform the economy. We need to declare that climate emergency right now and engage a massive employment program so that everybody gets put to work. It's like we cannot afford not to have all hands on deck. So that automation issue, I think it's more remote. We got to solve the climate problem first, and it's going to take everybody to do that. Let's say we got the climate problem solved. So everybody has a job. We're all now working to create clean, renewable energy, public transportation, a local and sustainable food system. We're restoring ecosystems. These are not like robots on a conveyor belt. This is other kinds of stuff that, we got to go into homes and businesses and schools and retrofit them. This is not automation stuff. So I'm not sure when that problem is, we have it now.
Yeah, we have it now.
We have it now. We absolutely
It's
do.
at a much faster rate than ever before.
Yes. But I think the climate emergency is going to overwhelm that problem, is going to overwhelm automation, at least for a while. But let's say we've gotten past that. Let me just say that automation should not be used to further oppress workers. It could be used to further liberate working people. Why should working people, have to pay because of society's advancements that really depend on us all, that are a product of society? So this should be a social benefit, not used to further oppress and entrap working people. That's why we need a new kind of government that is representing us and standing for us. Automation doesn't have to be any more of an oppression for working people than electricity or than clean energy. All of that could be used to oppress working people, but it shouldn't be, and it needn't be.
So how would you fight this automation oppression? Like through taxing automation, through universal basic income? What would be your solution?
Both of those are, absolutely an option, and that automation should not be used to simply enhance the profit margin of corporations that are already making out like bandits. That we need to have a tax system that ensures we continue to have a viable economy, because already it's become the economic disparities have become so outrageous. We do not have a viable economy. We no longer have money coming in through the bottom, which is what the real driver of a consumption economy has to be. So right now we got 8 billionaires that have as much money as 1/2 of the world's population. The year before, it was 64 billionaires. So that number is getting smaller all the time. We're going in exactly the wrong direction because we have exactly the wrong kind of government, which is funded by the oligarchy. We need to stand up and assert our power and take back the promise of democracy.
Absolutely. Which brings us to our next question. The Trump administration plans on changing the focus of the Countering Violent Extremism program to solely address radical Islamic terrorism, considering that right-wing extremists, whom are primarily composed of white supremacists and white nationalists, are responsible for more killings of U.S. citizens on U.S. soil on average annually. Do you believe that focusing solely on jihadist extremism is a proper policy?
It's extremely wrong-headed and destructive. And it essentially confirms the worst, accusations that are out there, not only in the Middle East, but here in the United States as well, that the U.S. is anti-Muslim and that we are discriminating and oppressing Muslim people in this country and around the world. So it's extremely counterproductive. It validates the feelings of those people who are, the next in line to be recruited to terrorist enterprises. And the numbers you gave, are absolutely right. The odds of being killed by a so-called Islamic terrorist, which is really a distortion of Islam, but the odds of being killed by such a person are like 1/5.
It's 0.00003%.
Which is 1/5 the odds of being struck by lightning. Yeah. On the other hand, there are 500,000 people who die every year from the consequences of poverty and poor education, which also, leads to poverty and homelessness and ill health and all that. So to make America secure, how about we start talking about 500,000 people who die needlessly every year from essentially economic oppression and lack of education? That would be how we truly improve American security. Then it's on average it's one person a year on U.S. soil who would be killed by a so-called terrorist. So let's put our money where it ought to go, not where it's going currently, which is essentially to drive fear into the hearts of Americans in order to set people against each other, in order to demonize immigrants and Muslims, to create xenophobia, and to essentially shore up support for an authoritarian, militaristic government. These are the tools of demagogues. These are the tools of right-wing extremism that we must resist.
Absolutely. And what I'm more so concerned with, considering that I am a person of color, is constantly in the media, we see individuals like Dylan Roof, for example, who are responsible for quite literally terrorist acts. And they're treated in the media as being misunderstood college students, for example, or lone wolf. How is it that we have, this government and a media that refuses to, consider white terrorists terrorists? They aren't extremists. We should be, calling them for what their actions, deem it. So it should be a shift, at least, to where people feel comfortable, considering that just because you're white doesn't mean that, you don't mean people, goodwill or what have you. So what I'm more so concerned with is this idea that in order to be a terrorist, you have to be, brown-skinned.
Exactly. Right. I mean, look at Timothy McVeigh, who blew up a government building with kids in daycare in it. I mean, and he was a right-wing Christian-inspired, and again, with a terrible misinterpretation that does a terrible injustice to Christianity in the same way that to associate extremists with Islam is an injustice to Islam. It is just a symptom of the inherent existing racism, and again, the intention to divide and conquer and create a society based on fear. And I think we stand up to that by refusing to give in to fear, refusing to give in to hate, and to just continuing to build a sense of community to address racism at its core. We should be having a community conversation on race, which we badly need at the local and community as well as at the national level, and we need to throw the bums out, who are disgracing our elected offices through their racist rhetoric and the likes of bringing absolute, unabashed racists like Stephen Bannon into the highest halls of power. This is just an incredible national scandal.
Absolutely. And I guess this can be our final question.
Yes.
All right. So in November of 2015, a statement was posted to your website that allegedly was uploaded without your prior viewing. The post called on then President Obama to not intervene militarily in the Syrian civil war, stating that the U.S. Should be working with Syria, Russia, and Iran to restore all of Syria controlled by the government rather than jihadi rebels. The statement was later deleted and accompanied by a new message calling for principled collaboration in bringing a weapons embargo to the region, freezing the bank accounts of countries that continue to fund terrorist groups, promoting a ceasefire, and supporting inclusive peace talks. Your then spokeswoman, Melissa, I believe is her name, Figueroa, she stated that you never took the position of returning control of Syria to Assad, but it begs this question. If you were elected president, would you work with countries like Syria and Russia that habitually violate human rights?
Yes, because we've got to solve our problems, and we got some really critical problems between us, and that includes the potential to, whether by intent or by accident, to slip into a nuclear confrontation, and that could happen in Syria, especially now that we have 500 ground troops there who could get themselves into the line of fire. There's all kinds of cross alliances going on here between Turkey and the rebels against Turkey and rebels with Assad and against Assad. There's just enormous potential for those alliances to trigger conflict. And having two nuclear powers now in Syria that are sort of collaborating but kind of not as well. But it was the Kurds in particular that I was thinking of also. The Kurds are, they're allies of us. They are some of the most powerful opponents of ISIS, but they are opponents of our other ally, Turkey. And so it's a very crazy and explosive scene. It needs to be basically dismantled. It needs to be neutralized. We need a ceasefire. We need a weapons embargo. And in my view, we need to stop allowing our allies and ourselves to send money overtly or covertly to ISIS and its terrorist cousins. It's a very murky scene, and bombs and bullets don't sort it out. We've got to figure that one out. We need to get rid of nuclear weapons. We should be dismantling nukes, not spending $1 trillion of U.S. taxpayer money creating a new generation of nuclear weapons. We can't hide our heads in the sand. We have to be willing to talk to our adversaries. And if you're looking at, violations of human rights, it's not as though you got one group over here with white hats the U.S. and another group over there with black hats. Plenty of violations of human rights going on right here, including millions of people, largely of color, who are incarcerated. We are the incarceration nation. We see incredible police violence, which goes unpunished and virtually unnoticed. So there are, and look at the human rights catastrophe going on with immigrants who are being turned into refugees by predatory trade policies that destroys their economies, by military interventions, by death squads which are trained by the U.S., which overthrow democracies, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, and instill, whether it's our military or corporations that we're supporting, we've had a hand in incredible human rights devastation around the world. As Martin Luther King said, there's no greater purveyor of violence around the world than the U.S. has been. So, I think we need to get real and acknowledge that we all have very compromised records here. And we need to recognize that these compromises are putting us all at risk right now for war, for devastating climate change, and for massive refugee crises. We need to start talking to each other, and we need to start dealing with each other in a principled way. And that includes defusing this time bomb, this ticking time bomb in Syria. It means we got to talk to all parties, and we need to move forward in a way that enhances us all. And let me just say very briefly, instead of spending half of our discretionary budget on the military, we could be putting that money into transforming our economy into a green economy. We wouldn't have to have the wars for oil to start with, and we should be leading the way and encouraging Russia and China to do that. But China's already doing it. Russia's having a problem because they're totally dependent on fossil fuels. We were on relatively good terms with Russia until Ukraine happened. And Ukraine was a very mixed bag. There were neo-Nazis involved on our side. You had the Assistant Secretary of State hand-picking who the successor was going to be to the coup. So this was a very mixed bag in Ukraine. That's where we kind of came to loggerheads. And there appears to be a weapons industry that is fanning the flames of conflict here. They want a reason to have a big weapons expense budget. Most Americans don't know that almost half of your income taxes are going for these failed wars, which have been catastrophic. They create failed states, mass refugee migrations, and worse terrorist threats. There's a better way forward with a foreign policy based on international law, human rights, and diplomacy. That's the direction that we need to go in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. This was truly a pleasure, Jill.
Thank you. My honor. And I'll just conclude saying that we need to end student debt. We need to bail out young people so we can get you out there and liberate you to be leading the way forward. Instead of spending $1 trillion on a new generation of nuclear weapons, which is what the Democratic White House obligated us to, $1 trillion. Let's spend that $1 trillion on liberating a new generation of young people to be actors in our economy and lead the way forward. We can do this the minute we stand up with the power of our convictions. And I want to encourage people to go to Jill2016.com or go to the California Green Party website or go to Kenneth Mejia, which is Mejia4Congress.com and plug in and let's take our future back.
Awesome. Thank you again so much. Truly.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.